Democracy is based on the principle of separation of powers, on the punctual functioning of its institutions, and above all on informed debate by the bodies elected by the people and the awareness of citizens. In 2003, the British democracy was betrayed to endorse the war in Iraq. There is only one way to restore the true meaning to the words democracy, law and liberty, after which they were abused to enter into war. By reconstructing the way in which the institutions were robbed of their authority and the effective exercise of constitutional powers was sabotaged in a great consolidated democracy like Britain. The United Kingdom's Foreign Minister Jack Straw presents the Blix report of 173 pages published a few days before on March 6, 2003. By the head of the United Nations Monitoring, Verification and Inspection Commission, UNMIVIC, the document forms the basis on which the House of Commons will vote on the UK's entry into the war against Iraq 1 week later.
Order. Statement, Secretary Straw.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to make a statement on Iraq and Israel-Palestine. This is, however, only the tip of the iceberg of Iraq's illegal weapons programme. The full extent of that iceberg was revealed in a document compiled by UNMIVIC entitled Unresolved Disarmament Issues, Iraq's Proscribed Weapons Programme, which was made publicly available late on the 7th of March last Friday. I've also placed copies of this document in the library of the House. I commend it to all members of the House, Mr. Speaker. It sets out in 173 pages of painstaking detail the terrible nature of the weapons which Saddam has sought with such determination to develop. It is a chilling catalogue of evasion and deceit, of feigning cooperation, while in reality pursuing concealment.
In his statement, Straw seems to argue that the UNMIVIC's inspectors found evidence of anthrax present in Iraq.
Let me give the House just one illustration. Anthrax, easily inhaled. The death rate in humans on untreated victims may be 90% or more. Only tiny amounts are needed to inflict widespread casualties. Contrary to Iraqi assertions, the inspectors found evidence of anthrax where Iraq had declared that there was none. Again, contrary to Iraqi assertions, UNMIVIC believes there is a strong presumption that some 10,000 litres of anthrax were not destroyed in the early 1990s and may still exist.
In a document he prepared and spontaneously submitted to the Chilcot inquiry some years later, Conservative MP Peter Lilly writes that he consulted a part of the Blix report on anthrax and found out that the findings of traces of anthrax, as mentioned by Straw, did not relate to the findings of the UNMIVIC's inspectors in 2002, but to those of UNSCOM inspectors in 1996, discoveries that had been in the public domain for quite some time. David Cameron, at the time Conservative backbencher, intervened during the debate.
David Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Foreign Secretary confirm that in the event of this House of Commons having a vote on a decision to commit British troops to a war in the Gulf, that the government will treat that vote as an issue of confidence?
We'll treat that vote as the issue laid down in the resolution.
During the debate on the following item on the agenda, a bill on local government, Conservatives' Peter Lilly takes the floor in a virtually deserted House.
The Foreign Secretary has just made a statement and based his case in it on a document called Unresolved Disarmament Issues, Iraq's Proscribed Weapons Programmes, produced by UNMIVIC. He said that copies of this document are placed in the library, and he commended it to all honourable members. He said it sets out in 173 pages of painstaking detail the terrible nature of the weapons Saddam Hussein has. I've just been to the library and asked for a copy of this document. I'm told that I cannot have a copy to take away. I have to sit there and read all 173 pages in the library. This is a very, very important document. It is the basis on which war may be declared within days. It is impossible for us to queue up and read it in the library without permission to take it away to our rooms. I would be grateful to you if you will have words with the library or the Foreign Office, have copies made available so that, as the Foreign Secretary says, all members may have access to this document.
On 17th of March 2003, the memorable and powerful resignation speech by the then leader of the House, Robin Cook, was not enough to stop military action, and the following day MPs gave Blair the green light to commit Britain to war.
Our interests are best protected not by unilateral action, but by multilateral agreement and a world order governed by rules. Yet tonight, the international partnerships most important to us are weakened. The European Union is divided. The Security Council is in stalemate. Those are heavy casualties of a war in which a shot has yet to be fired. As leader of this House, I've insisted on the right of this place to vote on whether Britain should go to war. I intend to join those tomorrow night who vote against military action now. It is for that reason, and that reason alone, and with a heavy heart, that I've resigned from the government.
So we arrive on the verge of war.
The ayes to the right, 412. The noes to the left, 149.
Order. The ayes to the right, 412. The noes to the left, 149. The ayes have it. Unlocked.
Thus was the deception to the detriment of the Parliament and the British people, against democracy and the rule of law.
Because when we look forward to the 2003 in February and March, then they became more what proactive, as the term was. The resolution required active, unconditional and immediate cooperation. And as the US pressure mounted and they really saw the dangers, then they also became more active. I've been criticized, and people said that at the end of January 2003, you were very critical of the Iraqis. But then 14th February and 7th of March in your statements, you became more upbeat. And said, why did you change your opinion? And I'm saying that, look here, if I'm there to observe and the circumstances change, I damn well ought to also to change my report.
In fact, the Arab world was talking more and more about taking him out, getting him into exile, getting more pressure on him, getting a resolution of the problem and him out without a war. Yet it's just not true that he was jerking any strings. The pressures were mounting and mounting. Why did they agree to the ballistic missiles all being broken up? They were worried. Yes, but you have to remember, I was leaving the government. Tony Blair has me alone and persuades me to stay, asks me to, and promises the UN lead and asks me to stay and work on that and bringing the international community together. No. Then normally, when a UN resolution's being negotiated, there are lots of telegrams with each draft. Suddenly, none of that. Nothing. Can't see what's happening. So we knew they were talking about it.
But you were still relying on the undertaking that Tony Blair had given you.
Absolutely.
About the role of the UN.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then, so we were kept out, no telegrams, no seeing what words people were working for, none of that. And then suddenly we're told it's been agreed. I think we still hadn't seen it when we got to the ministerial meeting, and neither had anyone else.
Now, what happened in the case of the Iraq War was the following. First of all, the government of the day, that's to say Mr. Blair's government, had made some crucial changes in the nature of the way he ran the government. It has been a tradition in this country that the permanent civil service works directly to ministers, and people who come in on a political base with ministers, their special advisors, operate sideways. That's to say they can operate to ministers, but they cannot have and should not have line authority over, in other words, be managers of regular civil servants.
Tonight, British servicemen and women are engaged from air, land and sea. Their mission? to remove Saddam Hussein from power and disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
Liberal Democrat Deputy Prime Minister Clegg calls for those responsible to respond to this illegal war.
But maybe he, one day, perhaps we'll have to wait for his memoirs, could account for his role in the most disastrous decision of all, which is the illegal invasion of Iraq.
So, Mr. Speaker, with the last British combat troops about to return home from Iraq, now is the right time to ensure we have a proper process in place to learn the lessons of this complex and often controversial event of the last 6 years. I am today announcing the establishment of an independent Privy Councillor Committee of Inquiry. It will consider the period from summer 2001, before military operations began in March 2003, and our subsequent involvement in Iraq right until the end of July this year. The inquiry is essential so that by learning lessons, we will strengthen the health of our democracy, our diplomacy and our military.
Now, we welcome an inquiry. Indeed, we've been calling for it now for many, many months. But I have to say, I'm far from convinced that the Prime Minister has got it right. The whole point of having an inquiry is it's got to be able to make clear recommendations, to go wherever the evidence leads, to establish the full truth, and to make sure the right lessons are learned. And it's got to do so in a way that builds public confidence. Isn't there a danger that what the Prime Minister has announced today won't achieve those objections? The membership looks quite limited, the terms of reference seem restrictive, and the inquiry isn't specifically tasked to make recommendations, and none of it will be held in public.
A secret inquiry conducted by a clutch of grandees handpicked by the Prime Minister is not what Britain needs.
Mr. Speaker, a proper inquiry must include a range of members, including senior politicians.
The report should be as comprehensive as is possible.
The purpose of an inquiry is not just to produce a set of conclusions.
It needs to have the freedom to range widely and to speak frankly.
Allow the people of Britain to come to terms with a mistake made in their name.
Its terms of reference must be debated properly in a democracy like ours.
In other words, all but the most sensitive of information should be something that is reported to the House of Commons.
The government, Mr. Speaker, must not be allowed to close the book on this war as it opened it, in secrecy.
Perché, cari colleghi, l'alternativa alla guerra non è per dei democratici, non è lo status quo, questo sanguinario, crudele regime dittatoriale chiamato da molti di voi pace. L'alternativa è la politica. E sta alla politica definire quale pace, quali condizioni, quali regole. Ma qui idee politiche non ne sono venute, salvo alcune banalità. E piaccia o non piaccia a questa supponente Camera, oggi l'unica proposta politica sul tappeto è quella di Iraq libero e democratico, sotto un governo di transizione, sotto l'egida Nazioni Unite, che prepari la transizione democratica per l'Iraq e gli iracheni.
Per 10 anni non avete voluto lavorare per il dopo Saddam, per realizzare la difesa della vita e del diritto in Iraq e nel Medio Oriente, e adesso ci troviamo, grazie a voi, a discutere del dopoguerra. La guerra è il regalo che l'Europa legalitaria, la vostra Europa, ci fa.
We demand for the truth to emerge and for the right to knowledge of the activities of governments and states to become an indispensable prerequisite in the functioning of democratic institutions, even when in crisis and emergencies.
It's obvious that we're creating a national security complex that is increasingly embedded in our way of life. Just, would you say, like the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned against?
Yeah, but we should remember the first version of Dwight Eisenhower's speech, which was not the military-industrial complex. It was the military-industrial congressional complex. And they talked him into dropping the congressional from that story. But I think that's the most important one. the way in which the military-industrial complex is in bed with Congress and makes it so hard for Congress to make any sensible policy, so long as they're dependent upon both the military and the industry to fuel their political survival.